Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today's video is complicated for me, not for you. You lucky people, lucky. It's a progress update video. This is the second one in a series which will take place towards the end of each month as long as there's something to do. Now the first progress update I did was for the period January, February and March, because there wasn't much done in some of those months, so I collected them together. This one, set 2, is for April. So all of the updates I'm going to do in this video were worked on in April in some shape or form. In fact, they were all repots as it happens, although some were taking them off of mounts and putting them into pots. Now, I'll do these in sets as there's enough to be able to do this, so that you might be able to, if you choose to go back and have a look at the video that goes with the work that was done, should you choose to do so. So for instance, on the 1st of April I worked on a Masdevallia and 2 Restrepias, yeah? So there'll be a video of me dealing with those 3 plants on the 1st. Yeah? You see what I'm getting at? And then the second group of plants is a Miltonia and 2 Oncidiums, and they were worked on the 12th of April. You get the drift. This is how it's going to do. So what I will do is I will get the plants out in their sets, which is the date they were worked on, and I'll do those like with a fade in and a fade out, so they make a distinct section within this video. And we'll have a look at those plants as they are today, 3 months on, and see how they're getting on. Are they doing anything? Nothing? All that sort of stuff. At the end of the video, I'll put the playlist up as an end video, end screen. And what I'll do now is I'll put the first progress update video up as an info card if you wish to watch it. That's coming up now. So if you've been away, welcome back. And without further ado, we need to crack on, because 2 things are going to happen, and I don't know when. 1, the sun's going to come round on the roof and it's going to get hot in here. And 2, it's going to chuck it down with rain, but I think that's later in the day. Neither of which I want when I'm filming. So we'll crack on and look at the first set of plants. Okay, so for each section, which goes with a date, I'll get the plants out and then we'll have a look at them. I'll shut down and put those away, get the next set out, because there's too many. There's 14 plants to look at. There's too many to put anywhere. And I've turned the camera around slightly, so although I need to turn my back on you to get the plants, I'm not off camera. Right, so plant number 1 was a Masdevallia Inca Prince, and it divided, so we ended up with a small division that's done nothing until very recently, at which point it's pushing out its first new growth. There's no root activity that I can see, but that new growth should start some. But the leaves have stayed green, so it should be okay. And then the main plant, which is currently in bloom, both of these went in my mix for roots, which is also my Masdevallia mix as it happens, which is small bark, perlite and sphagnum moss, with a fair bit of the moss near the top of the pot. So this one's currently in bloom, 2 blooms on this. This came from mixed Masdevallias. And basically the plant itself is pushing up some new growths. We've got one here. There's another one in the middle of the plant, so we have got some new growth starting. This bit did have some roots on. There is 1 new root I can see down in the pot that's got to the outside of the pot. That doesn't mean it's the only one. There's not a lot of root activity going on, but again, with new growths coming, the new roots will follow. So that was 1 plant, but it got split into 2. And then the next 2 in this group are Restrepias, and this one is a species Capria but it has to be classed as a hybrid. This came from Burnham's. I suspect what's happened is in their private area, which doesn't get as much attention as the other areas, the public areas, I suspect the species was lurking and a seed pod formed. So they have no idea what the pollinator was. Yeah? They don't know that the pollen came from another Capria, so they have to call it a hybrid, even though the blooms look spot on to me. Anyway, this got potted up in the same mix as the Masdevallias, and it is currently growing some new growths, and some of them are distorted. They don't open clean. When that happens, it's because the hydration's not getting in there in sufficient quantities. It's not that I'm not watering enough, it's that it hasn't got a good enough root system. But some of the leaves are coming out good, so it's getting there, and there are still new growths growing. So it's coming on. We've got new growths starting from the base and some pushing on, and a couple of distorted ones, but a couple have come out clean, and it's just finished blooming. You just missed the bloom. So that needs roots to get going better than it is at the moment. Restrepias are not too keen on being disturbed. They've got an incredibly fine root system that's difficult not to damage and difficult to make sure that all of the roots get into the new media, because they tend to be a wide, flat plant. They grow outwards into a platform. So the roots in the middle of the plant are difficult to get into the new media. They're not an easy thing to repot when they get big. Now this one is Sanguiniae, and this one's pushing out loads and loads of new growths. You can tell the new growths, they are a gorgeous, lovely, shiny green with a little tinge of purple. This is on the edge of a lower shelf. It might be getting just a fraction too much light. But a fraction too much light is not a big deal. But there are lots of new growths coming. At the moment I can only see one or two that are slightly distorted, and most are coming out clean, which means the roots are getting going. It is producing roots. Difficult to see them in this mix, but it's the same mix again. You know, the sphagnum, small bark and perlite mix. So, right, so that's that little set. Okay, next three were done on the 12th of April, so they'd have been done together. There'd be a video for those. Miltonia and the two Shari babies in this group. So we have the Miltonia spectabilis based hybrid. In other words, it's not the genuine article, it's got something else mixed in it. This was split up into pieces to grow on, and not these growths to flower, but the next set of growths to flower. All of the new growths are pushing on nicely, except this one, which was a bit late starting, but that's the second new growth on the same bulb. And most of these were just a back bulb and a tiny new growth, and the new growths are pushing on nicely. There's not a mass of roots coming out of those new growths yet, but if you look at this new growth as one of the most advanced, that one has got roots. So they obviously push out their roots on this particular hybrid late in the day, not as the new growths start, but as they head up towards maturity. But it's coming along. As I said, this was split up to grow on. And it's doing that, so it's doing as expected. We like that. Right, the Shari baby got split up. And this smaller piece is not doing very well yet. I say yet, it wobbles about, it hasn't got good roots, and it has a new growth. So this piece is not doing very well. I'm hoping it will pull on. I'm hoping this new growth will get some roots down in the pot and settle it down. Old pseudobulbs badly shriveled, and a new growth. So that's all that's happening on that. Not doing very well. The other pieces, however, Weighs a ton. I'll have to stay back here. Fragrance chocolate, vanilla chocolate. This is, however, doing very well. Let's have a look at the plant first. So I'm having to go very careful because the wire for the hot box is just above my head here and it keeps catching the plants. Let's take it up a bit higher. Right, this plant is doing very well. The pseudo bulbs are nice and plump and big. Oops, banging the roof now and banging the camera. So the plant is doing exceptionally well, and if you look down in the pot, we've also got masses and masses of new roots coming down. So this plant's doing everything. It's pushing up new growths and it's currently blooming. There's two big strong new growths there. Is it just two? One, yeah, two big strong new growths, one in the middle of the plant, one on the edge of the plant here, and currently we have a spike hooked up in the wire, a spike that's fully open with its branches, and we've got another one to come with branches, and another two spikes in their infancy. So again, this was potted up in my let's get some roots going mix, small bark perlite and sphagnum, and it seems to be enjoying it very well. That is a good cherry baby. The only thing that lets it down at the moment for visual appearance is a couple of really old leaves that have gone a bit manky, but possibly next time I water it I might trim them off just to tidy it up a bit. So there we go. That's that group, all worked on the 12th of April. Okay, the next pair are Miltoniopsis, and as it happens they are now my only two Miltoniopsis. I lost another one not that long ago. Now these were done on the 15th, and we've got, they've both gone in the, you know, the let's grow some roots mix, as one would expect. Small bark perlite and sphagnum. This is a hybrid that came from Burnham's, not in bloom, hasn't bloomed for me yet. Basically it's Miltoniopsis Red Knight Grail in quotes, and it's growing new growths. We've got one here, one here and another one here, so we've got three new growths on there. What we haven't got is the roots to go with them yet. I'll say yet. There's no sign of this pushing out roots, and it didn't have very good roots when I potted it up. So I'm not sure what that one's going to do. But the leaves have stayed green, and so far nothing's decided to rot. So that's that one. And the other one is a little primary cross. This is Miltoniopsis Venus. That's a cross between Vexillaria and Phalaenopsis. This is just about hanging in there. I've got to go very careful with this, with the watering, because there's a new growth here that's rotted, which means it's getting a bit too wet at the base. It's got roots and it's growing some new ones. As far as new growths on the plant are concerned, that one's rotting, the central leaf has gone, so that's failed. Then there's another one here that seems to be doing okay, another tiny one there in the middle, and the bulb that produced the growth that's rotting is producing another one. So it is growing and it has produced some roots, but it's not in a strong state at the moment. Not quite sure why. These are classed as shady growers, cool growers obviously, and I'm wondering whether they're not getting enough light. But what it's most likely to be is they're not getting enough airflow. They're on a second shelf down, right in the far corner. So they are at the farthest point from the small circulating fan that I keep on all the time, except when I'm filming. And that might not reach there. The big circulating fan will reach there fine, but that I only turn that on manually when it starts to get warm in here. In other words, when the sun hits the roof or it's a particularly warm day outside. Anyway, my last two Miltoniopsis, neither are doing brilliantly, but both are hanging in there. Okay, the next two were done on the 20th, so they'll be in a video together. And this was a plant split. Now this is not got a tag, and the fact that it hasn't got a tag tells me which one it is because all the others have. I know there's some strange logic there. And this is a Colmanara, and it's Masai either white or pink. But with the Colmanara Masai, there's a red, there's a white, there's a pink, and there's several other named versions. They are all incredibly similar apart from red, which is quite distinctive. But you'd think the one called white and the one called pink would be quite different. They're not, because the white has got quite a lot of pink on it, and there are paler versions and darker versions. The pink has got quite a lot of white on it, and there are paler and darker versions. They cross over, so it could be either. Yeah? Next time it flowers, I will try and do a more positive ID. Anyway, it had lousy roots. It's been potted up. This is the main plant. It's got one leaved bulb and a strong new growth that is starting to do some roots now. So we should get some roots down in the pot. Standard, let's have some roots, cool grower mix. So small bark perlite and sphagnum. And probably the only time you'll ever see me do it, but it was such a good plant as far as the blooms were concerned, and I liked it so much. I actually planted a back bulb. Now you don't see me do that often, but it has produced a nice strong new growth. But it's going to have to get a mature bulb that's a decent size and produce another growth before I'd even think about letting that put a spike up. So this is the problem if you do this sort of thing. You're 2, possibly 3 years away from blooming. But nonetheless, that new growth is pushing out roots and is doing okay. There's roots going right round the pot here and down into the pot. So we will have a second version of that plant. It's lovely bloom, so it was worth doing for this one. So that's those two. Okay, and the last two were two smallish Oncidium species. And they were done on the 25th of April. There was one that I included on my list that was wrong, and I've just realised it having picked the plant up. I had it down as being done in April, but it was actually a 2022 repot, so I've left that one off. So we'll have a look at the last two then. Both species, and this is Oncidium cherophorum. And this is one of the parents of the twinkles, all of them. And the other one is the sotoanum. I can't remember whether this was one plant or several, but the most important thing that this is doing is growing roots. So the new growths that are pushing up are pushing out roots. So this should become a reasonably strong plant. New growths are growing. This one's maturing. So's this one. We've got another one here and another one coming out the side here. So plenty of new growths and a good root system being generated. This went in small bark and perlite, no moss in there. So yeah, it's doing okay. Lovely little blooms, but tiny. So, you know, arching spike, branched, many blooms, but tiny and highly fragrant. And the other one in this pair, another species, and this is Chrysomorphum. Now this was a gift from Zena before she disappeared to northern Italy, and I've had trouble growing it. It's a funny one. It seems to survive and push out a new growth, and that growth completely matures before it pushes out a new set of roots. And as the new growth start, the old set of roots dies. So it spends some time with virtually no roots, which I think is what it's doing now, because I don't see, I've got 2 new growths there, and I don't see any signs of new roots coming off of that new growth. You can see for yourself. There's no roots coming out. And this is, you know, heading on now, but it just grows strange. It's just a strange one. Now this one in my notes says small bark and perlite. It doesn't mention moss, but there's definitely some moss in there. So I think that might have been where I don't finish up a mix and I put it in the bag to save it, and then I get that out to start the next mix and add some to it, and there might have been a little bit of moss left over, something like that, but my notes say that I didn't use moss. But the two new growths are pushing on. Old bulbs are quite shriveled. It seems to just do that. I've never managed to keep them plump. Now this has quite a large arching spike with nice flowers on, and they are slightly fragrant. I wouldn't say it's very fragrant, so there we go. So that's how these progress updates work, basically. The next progress update will be towards the end of August, and it will be for May, the work that was done in May. Now I can only carry on working like this while there is enough to do in a given month. That's why the first progress update was for 3 months, because I didn't get much done in each of those months individually. But for April and May there's plenty, and then we'll move on from there. So end of August will be set 3. They are random, as you can see. Yeah, there's all sorts coming into these. It's just as I get round to doing the work, or as the plants get to a good point to do the work. That's often what it comes down to. Have I got new roots or new growths, or preferably both? Anyway, I hope you enjoy these. They do take a bit of putting together, but it gives me a good opportunity to look over those plants, because normally when I'm watering I shouldn't be in a hurry, but I tend to put a hurry mind on, you know, so pick a plant up, water it, put it over there, pick a plant up, water it, and so on. I don't really have a good look at them unless anything a little untoward catches my eye, shall we say. So there we go, and I suspect this has ended up a long video, so be it. But I hope you've enjoyed it. Variety of plants, going over what they've done, what they had done to them, and now how they're progressing, if at all. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.